My name's Clair Gardener. I'm a Senior Learning Technologist at the University of Derby, and I'm based in the Centre for Excellence for Teaching and Learning. And this is my colleague Rob Fowles, and he's the Digital Marketing Manager. So the initial statement on the programme of introduction for today was, is your IT department ready to meet the new digital accessibility requirements? From our university, organisational, cultural perspective, responsibility has to be given to the university. It doesn't sit within IT at the University of Derby. It's everyone's responsibility. Systems, our digital infrastructure is owned across the entire university estate. So IT are just a single stakeholder in that. And you can probably tell that from our job descriptions just being up here. Neither myself or Rob are based in IT. Our background to this was that, my story is very similar to Fiona's. I was just going to get up here and say what Fiona said first thing. It's an incredibly similar situation. We were alerted to the accessibility guidelines back in, I think it was April 2018 at a Blackboard conference, because Robert McLaren from Policy Connect stood up and did a presentation. I sat there in a bit of shock and awe and thought, oh, it's Rob's problem because it's web, but then realised it quickly wasn't. I think we were a little bit probably slower to start to engage because a lot of what we were doing, the advice from GDS was still emerging. And so I think we're in a bit of a phase of sort of watching and waiting and seeing what that meant for the sector, for VLEs, for the accessibility statement guidance. So we've really started only taking this awareness, I think, probably the last 12 months this year or so. For me personally, we've been driving it from the ground up, really, and that's been a really successful approach for us. So when I came back from that conference, we'd also purchased Blackboard Ally, so it was sort of aligned to a lot of the conversations I was having out within our colleges and departments. We were driving awareness, and we were driving that awareness from the ground up, and then one day, because we're having these similar situations, I bumped into Rob, and that's how we've ended up working along this together, because it takes up most of our job role at the moment. Where we did start to see some engagement is we formed a working group, and I'm going to let Rob talk to you about that.
Hi. So, as Claire said, various conversations had started within the institution after that conference that Claire mentioned, but also as there was more airtime being given, certainly through the digital media, etc., of what this meant. Unlike GDPR, there was no clear ownership. It was recognised that everybody really had a part to play, but there was nobody really driving that, and I think that's potentially why we took so long to get started. So some activity had already begun, so Claire and her team had started gaining momentum around the VLE. We'd started gathering momentum around the website in terms of reviewing accessibility issues on a weekly basis and trying to fix those, and that was on content and from technical development point of view. But having said that, I don't want to undersell the activity that was taking place outside of our teams. There was other stuff going on, but I don't think everything was aligned at the time. So we were having these regular conversations with IT, so everybody knew what was going on, but as I said, nobody's really driving it. We recognised that we needed to get a working group formed, and that's where we started talking about this, and we got some contribution from IT in that sense. They said, have some project support, but this doesn't mean this is our project. So it's it remained a collective sort of project outside of the main project group. So the remit of the accessibility group was to identify risks and actions, but we weren't responsible for the delivery of those. We could provide advice, guidance, identify what we needed to do as an institution, but it was not our role as part of the group to deliver that. We needed to focus on how we could affect that change, so we recognised that part of this was going from the ground up. So we've got 3,200 people producing documents, our staff. That needs to be solved fairly quickly, otherwise we're going to keep that problem rolling on. And we were trying to get everybody to the idea of thinking inclusive and accessible, much like we've heard from this morning. In terms of membership, I'll just go over that quickly. So that was my team, the digital team. We had IT, our learning technologists, HR, corporate comms, students' union. We had legal in there, so we had a really good sort of basis for that. And despite what I think we've achieved quite a lot in the time period, which I'll go into in a minute, but We've only had that running for 3 months, so it's actually been, as I said, we were slightly delayed in getting started, but 3 months is how long it's been formalised for. As part of that, we identified some key things that we needed to achieve. So identification of all the sites and system owners that we had, because it turned out we didn't have a complete list of everything that identified who was responsible and where budget led. We wanted to implement a consistent approach to accessibility statements and the reporting of accessibility issues. We wanted to try and tackle suppliers, because again, much like people producing documents, our suppliers were a key area for us to influence as well. We needed to run an internal comms campaign, part of getting everybody on board. So our comms team came out with this sort of hints and tips and regular updates every week. So staff are now starting to see this every week, what accessibility means. And the other thing that we wanted to do was to get the project recognised at the top level of the university within our executive. So to do that, we wrote a paper. We then presented that paper, which was on Monday this week, so that now it's recognised as something that the whole institution has to solve. So, and out of that working group, we've got, out of that exec sponsorship, we have a person that is responsible from exec level, but they've naturally come back with some quite challenging and testing actions for us, and saying, how do we fix this across the entire institution? Now, obviously, they thought that was quite an easy question, but that could take some time to identify. But also, part of my ulterior motive of the whole project was to get on the table a proposal around how we should be governing our external web estate, because up until now, there hasn't been a fully uniform governance process. So that's something that we managed to get through that.
So the next part of this presentation is just to talk about some of the practical activities that we've been doing. I think that's quite important to share some of those, and that's what I'm interested in hearing about. So from the VLE teaching and learning perspective, it's basically been a comms campaign. So we've been promoting our Blackboard Ally tool, of course. What we've came up with is a really good structure and approach for staff to start embracing the changing content. We've had to be very careful, we realised, on how we approach these discussions with staff, because some of them do get quite prickly about how, how to develop content, seeing it as and more. We framed a 3-step process around that. So it was using the Microsoft Accessibility Checker that was just highlighted to us earlier. I'm looking for... Can't see. So it was when you're creating content, we went out and said, if you do one thing, it's just go to File, Options, and check Accessibility. It's where it is on our version. Then you can upload it into the VLE, and then you've got the Ally tool, which sort of talks you through it. And it was a really simple 3-step process, and they really engaged, and I didn't hear any grumblings off the back of that. That seemed like a manageable approach for them. We're able to, where we've had great successes, we have college away days, so we're able to get out into those away days and talk to the staff on the ground. That's some of our biggest area of success and engagement in those. We, of course, run all our normal training sessions and drop-ins. Again, some of our more popular training sessions aren't necessarily on how to use a specific tool. It's more about embedding that into teaching and learning and giving slightly broader look at tools that we have in the estate, which do look at accessibility. So some of those bigger picture sessions tended to work and see a lot more engagement than the smaller side. As Rob mentioned, we've done a lot around communication, so different departments have their own accessibility guidance and help pages already that exist. So we've just merged that into one page. So there was guidance from my team about engaging with the tools. We had lots of top tips about creating accessible documents. We've merged that with some of the advice that sat under IT and again out in Rob's team. So we've been able to pull that together, and we're just doing regular comms campaigns and sort of reintroducing that from a central message. And I think that's something that's going to be key, is just keep on with that momentum of sharing. From a practical level, we have had Ally in for 12 months. That is working. We've seen a 12% increase on the stats in the system on the accessibility of our VLE. So it is working, and we are seeing some impact. Let Rob talk to you about impact on the web.
So in terms of our web estate, or the web estate that we're responsible for, we've been using a platform over the last few years called Sitemore. Some of you might have heard of it. So that provides a score on accessibility. Yes, it's nominal, as we've heard from earlier. It can't capture everything, but it gives us a score nonetheless. And the output from this is reviewed every week, and we make development and sort of content changes based on that. We are also running more in-depth reviews using tools like the Microsoft Accessibility Insights to make sure that we're constantly reviewing those things. On the main website, we've got a hybrid model of publishing, so we've got probably about 20 or 30 moderators who then have some contributors around them, and that's how they approve and publish their content. What we've discovered is, even though we've been running very, very extensive training, I mean, it's more extensive now than it ever has been before, we are still finding people are publishing content that's completely inaccessible, that just completely ignores everything that we've told them. So we have implemented a test. The test has not gone down very well with the people that fail, but the people that pass understandably now understand why we're doing it. And this is now being supported up to the exec level because they realise the responsibilities and the reputational impact of not doing some of these things. So that's starting to work, and actually is having a sort of additional effect of making people recognise that web content editing is part of a profession. It's not just something you pass to somebody and they can just do. So that's helpful. With that, it's a 60% pass mark, and yeah, it's gone down very well. There's been some apologies recently about shouting, but I won't go into that. We've also started the process of assessing our other websites. Now, the way we're set up at the moment, as I kind of alluded to before, my team are responsible for the main website and a couple of other small sites. However, there is a whole lot more. So the next stage is really about identifying all the other problems that we've now got in the university.
Are we ready for Monday? I don't think you talked about the accessibility statement earlier, and I don't know whether we'd ever put ourselves as fully compliant on that accessibility statement. Given HE, unless it's a one-page site, I don't think that's ever going to get to optimal accessibility. I think that's always going to be something that evolves over time, especially where the content and pages are changing. I think we're ready for Monday. Much of our infrastructure comes into scope in 2020. I know we've got an accessibility statement on the website. The VLE will have one for Monday. I think a lot of it is just around continual awareness. I think it's going to be a lot of repeat and embedding in institutional culture. You got any? And yeah, 1 minute, that's it. There are contact details.
Thank you.